So for cops, for example, they don't want to recruit cops that are above like 110 IQ, because if you have a higher IQ than that, you're going to question authority and question what's going on. So like you get to a certain point where you're part of a system, but you're so gung-ho about being like the good guy and the patriot and you know, et cetera, et cetera. The methodology for finding these kinds of people that would be qualified seems to be lingering, because what we have going on in the DEA and CIA around the alien cover-up and everything else that's going on is a complete fucking shit show. And so if I know that these people are running such a shit show at the top, you know, what are they getting from the bottom? Like,
so what are some of the things that the DEA is running in relation to these people that they're recruiting?
there's a book, I cannot remember the title of it. It's an audiobook you can find online about the DEA and the CIA's relationship and how they've been, you know, the crack epidemic of the 80s and all this stuff was heavily CIA influenced. And so DEA does stuff overseas too. Like, it's not that they're just like a American agency or whatever, but it's the Drug Enforcement Agency. And they were created, I think it was by Nixon, to solve so the history of it goes, 1964, the United Nations created something called the schedule system for narcotics or chemicals itself. So schedule 1, 2, and 3. 1 means no medicinal value. 2 has some medicinal value, and so forth. So like meth, heroin, schedule 2. Marijuana was schedule 1. And there's a lot of people within the Nixon administration. There's even, you can Google it online and find some quotes from it, talking about how the war on drugs was created to infiltrate minorities, i.e. black people at the time, and hippies and dissidents. So they used, because they knew all these dissidents and anybody that was like against the government was doing marijuana or smoking weed. And so if you make it schedule 1, and so hold on, it was 1964 for the United Nations. Richard Nixon signed it into American law, I believe in 1973, to create the schedule system within the United States, and later gave the authority to the DEA to then enforce whatever they want with drugs. And this means using informants. This means using low-level guys to buy stuff for you just to find out who's selling, et cetera, because it's a whole like system they had to crack, which they obviously can't fucking figure out. And then at the time, there were things like the mafia. There was things like gangs were starting up, like Bloods and Crips were starting to pop up, and all these like actual like bikers too. For example, like the Banditos, and the leader of the Banditos got busted last year for narcotics trafficking, or 2 years ago, and Hell's Angels and all this stuff. So like there's these underground world being influenced, manipulated, and infiltrated by the DEA, the CIA, and all facets of, you know, culture, as it were. And so there's just like this shitstorm going around with the war on drugs that it ended up turning the United States into the world's largest penal colony. And it's because of the war on drugs, it's because of the laws around it, and it's because of the culture that they recruited within these systems of cops, DEA, and et cetera, and FBI and all that. So they created a culture within their system. They told that culture to attack the other culture, and then they manipulated it from the back end through using agencies.